It has been a quarter century since the release of the Canon 1D in 2001. That statement is not going to age well, but it must be said, I feel. Because what used to be the baddest-assed piece of tech on the Earth is now a relic, older than a lot of the people carrying the art forward. So that's what that feels like. Good Lord. It's also an interesting conversation starter, this camera, unfortunately for me. But it's interesting, I have observed, when someone sees a beautiful sunset, for example, and then they see someone with a big imposing camera, I think they often feel a sense of catharsis. The moment has been preserved, it's not up to them. Takes the pressure off of them, perhaps. I'm just speculating. Because people don't really approach me in my normal life. I kinda look like an ogre, and I'm aware I give off strong keep away vibes, but somehow when I'm toting around a camera, I become highly approachable. Evidently, people will just walk up and ask me if I got a good shot, like we're playing for the same team, which is cool. I think it's a really sweet, is the only word I can come up with, and then the conversation will often evolve from there, but I can deal with it. In order to be the loud guy barking out orders, which is antithetical to my entire being, but necessary, right from the start, the only way I could deal with that was to sort of make up a character, play the role of the loud photographer guy, so I can usually slip back into character when I must. And I had a great role model, my obnoxious loud photographer boss at the time. I just modeled the character after him. Actually, I probably appear more competent with basic social interactions these days, not because I've improved, but because the population at large has gotten worse, and expectations are at an all-time low. I'm shooting in color matrix 3, more on that later, and I'm shooting RAW plus JPEG, though a particular prototypey oddity of this camera is that it only shows RAW on the bottom screen, even when you're shooting RAW plus JPEG. But unless otherwise indicated, I will only be showing the unedited JPEGs, so exposures will be a little inconsistent. They might scream out for a tweak. White balance, same. But I will be resisting that temptation, and if not, it will be indicated on the screen. Or I'll just tell you, or show you. Really though, I'm not the biggest fan of making something and dating it to the current date, 25 years. Except next year it's going to be 26 and so on. I learned this lesson when I scanned my grandparents and even a few of my great-grandparents' photographs. They recorded the dates with the 2-digit year, and some of the photos were more than 100 years old, so I realized some awareness that your work might live on outside of its original context never hurts. But screw it, I'm making something that's going to be outdated extremely quickly. This is what autofocus looks like on the Canon 1D. From experience, I'll say that while all 45 autofocus points are potentially useful, only the center point is actually very good. But it is very good. When you engage all 45 points, it's never going to pick out an eyeball or some other small target, but it can be useful in certain situations. A flat image plus a very deep depth of field, it can certainly handle that. Or even shallow depth of field if there are foreground elements that are very distinct from the background, like tree branches or something. The camera will probably find those very easily. It really can be useful at times, just not a good idea generally to go around allowing the camera to choose what to focus on, because I love the Canon 1D. Absolutely no offense meant, but it's a moron. It doesn't know. How could it know? Same with exposure. I would never trust this thing to set its own exposure because the files just don't give you a lot of working room to push and pull them. With such limited dynamic range, you need to watch your exposures and be very careful, which is a wonderful way to shoot. It's like when you actually watch the movie versus looking at your phone while the movie's playing in the background. It's great. You get involved in a real way. How could that ever be a bad thing? But I seriously doubt anyone is going to buy this camera specifically to go shoot weddings or other types of professional work. Though I did. I'm not saying you shouldn't, maybe you should. Well, more on that in a sec. Let me get to my point. This camera means an awful lot to me. I think of it as the camera that launched my photography career, though technically it's not. I used a couple others first to get started, either non-pro cameras or pro cameras that I didn't own, but this was the first pro DSLR that I ever owned. when I was forming my opinions about what a camera should be, this is the camera that was shaping that opinion. There's just no way I'm going to be able to put into words what this camera means to me. Words like love and adore are far too generic to ever convey what I feel when I'm shooting this. It reminds me of my wedding. It reminds me of people I've lost and cats I've lost. A cat, Molly specifically. Miyako here is not going anywhere, she's assured me. So I've got the raw file open here because I didn't care for the white balance nor the exposure straight out of camera. This is Canon's free software, Digital Photo Professional. It's a very capable tool, just slow as hell if you're working with modern files. It handles these old 1D files pretty well though. The advantage though being that you can retain original camera colors if you edit in DPP. Mostly, sometimes I see a slight difference. So speaking of Molly, this is Molly and I, Circa 2000. I wanted to show an example of the quality you could expect from a consumer digital camera around that time. And so there it is. And this is from my first year of shooting weddings. I'd carry around a mobile 1D like this, and I'd have a second 1D on a tripod with a telephoto lens. I still have this Sigma 15 to 30 millimeter ultra wide, but just the quality difference between a consumer digital camera at the time and a pro camera, pretty drastic. It was a weird time in technology because we were giving up noticeably better quality with film for the convenience of digital. The same sort of thing was happening in music, giving up uncompressed music for compressed music. That was kind of unprecedented. Or maybe not. Maybe if you think about smaller film formats becoming more common than larger ones, that's kind of the same trade-off. But generally we think of new things replacing old things because they're superior in some way. You abandon the old format in order to upgrade to the quality of the new format. But many people hadn't switched to digital yet. Many people found the very idea offensive. The white balance on these first couple shots here came out weird. I opened the RAWs. I tried to fix them in DPP. They still look a bit weird. I'm sure I could have fixed them in something like Lightroom, but I really wanted to keep that original color palette going, so I just didn't worry about it too much. But I used to tell those people, let's not pretend that you found this roll of film growing under a rock with the mushrooms. It's all technology. You've just become inflexible. Kinda true, but also, film is awesome. I love film. It feels more miraculous to me, film. Somehow the technology behind digital cameras feels more understandable and more inevitable. And film still feels more like magic. And I shoot video through the Viewfinder, not because I like doing it that way, although some people seem to like it when I do it that way. I prefer not to, but it's better for my eyes. My aging, deteriorating eyes. That said, I did kind of a bad job here. The weather was pretty harsh this morning. The camera's weather sealed, but not all of my lenses are. So I had plastic bags around stuff. I couldn't quite get everything aligned properly with my clunky gloves on. I had way too much crap with me, hanging around my neck, and everything was getting tangled up. Plus there was no safe place to set anything down, so the top right corner of the video is dark because it's just not lined up very well with the Viewfinder. I saw it as I was shooting. It was frustrating, but there wasn't anything I could do about it in the moment. Also, my DJI mics completely failed me for the first time. I'm afraid it's because they got wet. Because the snow would melt as it would hit my gear. Hopefully I didn't ruin them. So I just had to ditch them and use the onboard mic. But oh well, what can you do? So I said earlier that I doubt anyone would choose this camera today for professional work. Let me elaborate. There are so many great options, used older cameras, Canon and otherwise, cheaper, newer, easier to find, better technically in all senses. But that's not a shortcoming of this camera, that's just what happens, time moves on. Plus you have to pay a bit of a premium to get a used 1D today, because it's the first of its kind. Canon's first flagship DSLR. I can't even give you a used 1D price range. I've been following it for about 6 or 7 years, and it's just basically all over the place. But generally it's a lot higher than it should be based on merit. But if you already own this camera, you could absolutely use it for professional work. I mean, that is what it was intended for. Yes, the resolution is pretty low. 4 megapixels, not an impressive number even at the time. 35mm film landing somewhere between 10 and 20 megapixels. 6x7 medium format can give you something equivalent to 80 megapixels. I mean, I love the camera. There, I used that word, but I love it not even in spite of its 4 megapixel sensor, but because of it. I'm just into that sort of thing, pushing stuff to its limit, or a touch beyond. Tools like this really suit my personality and my approach to life and art. How can I express this? In the course of doing one's own thing, pushing their gear, using unusual... This is hard to explain. I end up buying gear, or random parts that aren't specifically meant to serve as photography gear, conducting experiments, trial and error. I fail spectacularly, I make adjustments. I find myself frequently up against some boundary. There's a thing that I want to accomplish, and I start with the thing I want to accomplish and work backwards. I get hyper-focused on trying to make it happen. The gear I have is not getting me there, so I search for a solution. That is a very different approach as compared to like doing the same thing over and over until such time as new gear is presented to you, often for a great deal of money, with a fresh new list of things that you are now allowed to do with it. I'm thinking hardware, but it could just as easily be software. One approach feels passive, like you're waiting for permission, and one feels like forging your own path. And if that sounds obnoxious, I apologize. It's just a thing I've noticed for as long as I can remember. I feel like one of those approaches is far more satisfying, but the other tends to be far more ubiquitous. And I recommend the forging your own path method. It's a lot more fun. I had the rather bizarre experience recently of having a photographer I used to work with repeat back my words from 20 years ago as their own thought, which they obviously didn't remember came from me in the first place, but I remember because it was my own personal experience at the time, my story, my conclusion, based on my limited data set at the time, and rejected my updated opinion and product recommendation based on reciting my opinion from 20 years ago back to me. But the thing is, I've tried and learned new things in the last 20 years. Shocking, I know. But I mean, isn't the goal to grow as a person? I mean, it seems obvious. Maybe it's not. We're born as useless, ignorant, selfish, needy shit factories. Hopefully by the time we check out, that no longer describes us. That is what I hope for, at least. I'm a nostalgic dude, but I do hope to grow as a person. And I don't really see those two things as in conflict, necessarily. It is important, however, that I point out, if you enjoy old gear the way I do, or if you're new to photography, and you have access to an original 1D, keeping in mind what I said earlier, I think you'd have a great time with this camera. How could you not? But in no way is it my intention to tell you to buy it, nor to tell you that old stuff is better or just as good as new stuff. That's not the point. Time moves on, stuff gets better. Just perhaps maybe not as much better as marketing would like you to believe. Camera companies need you to feel like this stuff is not good enough in order to get you to buy the new stuff. So if you're getting an overall different message from people actually using the gear, maybe it's not just some silly retro trend. Maybe there's some substance there. See this parameter section in the 1D menu? Notice Jpeg quality? I'm fortunate that the previous owner of this camera set this to highest quality Jpeg, because you can only change that setting by connecting the camera to a computer via a Firewire cable. I remember doing this with my original 1D way back when. Wouldn't it be fun, I thought, to dig into those settings again? But Firewire is not adaptable to USB. So I was going to try to do Firewire to Thunderbolt 2, then Thunderbolt 2 to Thunderbolt 3, but Jerry from Jerry Rigged Media reminded me I could just install a PCIe Firewire expansion card in my Windows desktop instead. And indeed, the computer now sees the camera, so that's cool. Finding the software, the drivers, that was extremely challenging, but I think I managed to do that as well. But I'm not sure if what I found is authentic, because the drivers simply will not install on a modern operating system. And after doing a lot more research, I discovered that this essentially has zero chance of ever working, even in a virtual machine. because Firewire requires native access to the system bus, and virtualization breaks that. The Canon software expects a real Firewire controller talking straight to the camera. But Firewire was designed in a very different time. It expects a lot of control, direct memory access, low latency, minimal CPU involvement, assumptions that were acceptable then, but stuff that does not fly in the very security-conscious present. So the reality is, this is only going to work on period-correct hardware, which I can't really justify buying right now, so I had to let the idea go. But thanks for the suggestion, Jerry. Or maybe I'm just a moron and couldn't get it to work. But I love Jerry's videos. He's the one that loaned me a Fuji S2 Pro a while back. I'll leave his channel in the description. Please go encourage him to make more photography videos. The Fuji S2 Pro ties into this topic in another way. I mentioned that technically I didn't start my career on the Canon 1D. Well, technically it wasn't the S2 Pro either, but it kind of was. I shot an Olympus for the first year and a half or so. Then I shot a Fuji S2 Pro for some months when I was learning wedding photography. Then I bought my 1D. Then the studio I was working for provided a second 1D. Because you can't shoot a wedding without a backup. Well, you can, but you shouldn't. Somewhere in there before the 1D, I shot a Canon D30. Canon hadn't even figured out their naming convention yet, because years later they launched the 30D, a different camera. The D30 was actually Canon's very first DSLR, predated the 1D, the 1DS, the 10D. The 10D, 20D, 30D, 40D, etc. The D30 was the predecessor to that line of cameras. I have basically no memory of shooting it. Specifically, I know I did shoot it. I even found some photos I shot with it, but it was so long ago and I didn't shoot it for long enough for it to make any kind of an impression, really. But I would love to try it again today. It's an interesting piece of history. As for the color matrices, which are oddly identified by number rather than a description, back when I was using this as my main work camera, I shot color matrix 1 basically all the time, the standard profile. When the 1D Mark II came out and I couldn't afford it, I found myself playing around with color matrix 2 a bit for some shoots on the original 1D. It's the portrait profile, because I felt it looked a bit more like the 1D Mark II, which I preferred at the time. Not sure I do anymore. But lately I've been shooting color matrix 3, which looks a bit more like slide film. More saturated, punchier. So I do color matrix 3 and cloud white balance setting, and that gives me a color palette I really enjoy. I won't attempt to describe it, because I'm colorblind and my perception of color isn't going to translate well into words, but I dig it. I really, really dig it. The 5Ds get all the love, but the 1Ds are the shit. Especially this original 1D. Though I think if you have no pre-existing love for this original 1D, the 1D Mark II is a better choice, because you can still find them everywhere for a lot cheaper, same experience, double the resolution. But I like the original. Plus I shoot the 1DS Mark II. Again, same experience, but even more resolution at 16 megapixels, plus it's full frame, and the original 1D is not. But see you again in 25 years.